So in terms of these capabilities, whenever we're talking about supply chain network redesign, it is a what we refer to as a phased approach. And I would actually say that a number of these approaches should be approaches that should be implemented for any organizational change initiative, to be honest. Okay. So in going through each one of these, whenever you want to define a supply chain network design process, the very first step is that initiation process. What is our supply chain transformation team going to look like? What is it going to be composed of? In most cases, that supply chain network team is going to be composed of people from different departments. It does not just have to be people from the supply chain end or supply chain department. It's going to be from different departments because that's going to give you different perspectives. Also, you're going to have a transformation team from around the world. So whenever we're doing a digital transformation for Intel, we had programmers, we had people from accounting, we had people from sales, we had people from supply chain, we had people from engineering, we had people from the US, we had people from Poland, we had people from China, from all over the world. And that's important because when we look at supply chain network redesign from a US perspective, it's going to be totally different than how they operate in China, how they operate in Poland. Right? So that diverse team is very important, and that diverse team can actually could very well make or break a project. Because if we implemented a project based on our US thoughts, our US processes, we implement them and we try to roll them out in China, and there's regulations that do not allow us to roll out those processes, then we have a problem. We have a lot of wasted time. We have a lot of wasted money. So that's why it's very important to consider that team from different parts of the world, from different departments. Okay. You want to also ensure that the objectives of the organization, the mission and vision of the organization is also aligned with this network redesign process. And you also want to evaluate, how much are we going to bring in external suppliers? How much are we going to bring in external third-party consultants? So that's how I got involved with Intel. I worked for a management consulting company. So Intel brought us in because we had expertise in supply chain optimization, supply chain network design, digital transformations. And now that was done at the beginning of the process. Okay. So that's another consideration. And I'm always a proponent of, bring in the best. Bring in the best because although their consulting fees on paper may be high, it's going to also cost you money to educate the people within your organization as well. So I'm always a proponent of these third-party suppliers and third-party providers of services and products. All right. So the second step is you want to perform a supply chain audit. So you want to look at the current state of your supply chain. So we want to say, okay, what's the current state of the supply chain? We want to interview people. So we'll take quantitative. So we'll take the numbers. And then we'll also take the qualitative data, which is going to be interviews, surveys, and things like that from our organization. And we're going to collect all this data to understand what is the current state of our supply chain network, good or bad, right? So once we have performed that current state assessment, then we say, okay, what does the future look like? How do we want our future supply chain network to look? And that's the importance of that supply chain audit. And I think the most important thing is that number 5 is where, what are the strategic issues? Because we have to attempt to address every single one of those issues. And again, this now we're talking about supply chain, but I know every single one of you are not in the supply chain discipline. So these steps, this audit can go for what's our accounting audit, what's our financial audit, what's our marketing audit, what's our engineering audit. This audit is very important for every single department within an organization, where you can identify what's the current state of the process, and then what does the future state look like to provide to increase efficiencies within the organization. Any questions so far? All right. So next we want to look at our supply chain. We want to look at our supply chain network alternatives. So we want to say, okay, here's our current state, here's our future state. What other options do we have? Now, here's where we get into the quantitative models. And again, the enterprise resource planning applications that we have. So again, the N4s, the SAP, the Oracles, they have tools in place that will pull the data that you currently have, that people around your organization, around the world, is inputting every single day, so that you can provide what if analysis. And these systems will give you suggestions on what alternatives you have, for example. So we can create models, we can create what if analysis, and we can say, okay, we have 10 distribution centers around the US, across the US. What if we simply expanded those distribution centers? If we took our capital and expanded on those existing 10 distribution centers, that's scenario A. Scenario B is, what if we just kept those 10 DCs and we leased inventory from another distribution center, from a third party distribution center facility, for example, right? Let's face it, right now, if we take the current state, there's a lot of distribution centers that are empty right now because those companies closed their doors due to COVID, right? So now we can put that in the what if analysis and say, okay, there's a lot of open distribution center space in the US, and it's going to cost us this much to buy that distribution center. What's going to be the what if analysis for that, right? Another what if analysis could be, what if we just consolidated all of our distribution centers? So instead of 10, what if we consolidated down to 7? What if we consolidated down to 5? So you have all of these different network alternatives that can actually be ran. And so now we're seeing artificial intelligence brought into this to provide more predictive analytics, more predictive analysis, to assist organizations in things like these, right? So that's what I said. You don't have to understand these quantitative models. You don't have to understand these quantitative tools. You don't have to understand artificial intelligence. It's just your job to understand what's available. All right. So again, we briefly spoke about location analysis. So location analysis is where we would take these models, we would take these tools, we would take things such as linear programming, and we would assess what would be the most effective location for a facility. So if you're driving down the highway, you'll be driving for hours, and all of a sudden this massive distribution center pops up out of nowhere, right? And that's because these distribution centers, these manufacturing facilities, need to be located where these trucks can easily get in and easily get out of those facilities, because they have trucks coming in 24/7, 365 in some cases, right? So that's what we look at when we look at location analysis. Now, when we look at location analysis, one thing that's very important is you need to assess, a few things are very important, I should say, is you need to assess the proximity to customer. You need to assess the proximity to supplier. You need to assess the proximity to workforce. and you need to assess the proximity to the amenities. So for example, when I say amenities, I'm talking about the healthcare facilities, the education for the schools for these employees' children, the any kind of entertainment. That is the important things that people assess when locating facilities. For example, I always share this example because it drives this point home, in that Amazon eliminated a city in Texas when it was going to build its HQ2 location, because they felt that that location did not have the technological expertise to meet the needs of Amazon. So that location did not have the proximity to workforce, if you will, right? It lacked the knowledge that Amazon was expecting. So because of that, Amazon actually relocated close to me in the DC area, right? Because there's a number of institutions that are big, they're heavy in technology. They offer a lot of programs. They have a lot of doctoral programs in artificial intelligence, machine learning, for example. And that's the next wave of what Amazon's looking for, right? They have a lot of there's a lot of institutions that are there. There's the world leading institutions in cybersecurity. That's the big thing that Amazon looks for. So that's just one example of whenever an organization would provide a location analysis. So you would use tools like that. So again, you would use a quantitative tools such as linear modeling, linear modeling, linear regression, things like that to assess the locations for a facility. You would actually look at qualitative data such as interviews, surveys, things like that. So I think that's how Amazon uncovered their that location in Texas, where they performed a survey and seen there was a gap in that particular area. So that's how that organization was. That's how that location was eliminated. All right. So once all of this data has been selected, once we've analyzed, so whether or not we're going to consolidate, whether or not we're going to expand, whether or not we're going to build, now we create an implementation plan. So we create an implementation plan, which is it's going, in most cases, going to be a project composed of a project charter, where we're going to initiate the project. We are then going to assess who's going to be a part of that project team. We're going to create a project plan, and then we're going to pretty much develop these facilities. We're going to either develop these facilities, we're going to release out space, or we're going to expand these facilities. So the implementation plan pretty much charts the path, charts the blueprint for that particular plan.